Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk Physical Media. My name is John. My co-host Faith will be with me in a little while, and this is the weekly show where we like to talk all things physical media, film, answer all of your burning questions, and talk about whatever the hell else we want to talk about for about 45 minutes to an hour. And we like to start the show off every single week with the news, and there was a fair amount of news this week. Nothing like last week. We got some new announcements. We got Criterion announcing their April releases, and the big one for me, the standout release that they announced, is in April. We're going to be getting 1976's King Kong on 4K Blu-ray. Now, a lot of people might not think that this is their favorite King Kong film. A lot of people probably prefer the original or Peter Jackson's King Kong, but not this guy. I always loved the 1976 King Kong, and a lot of that is due to nostalgic purposes. My mother showed this to me when I was about 6 years old. I can still remember sitting in the living room. We had one of those, big TVs that you put on the floor, those wood paneling TVs that were ridiculously heavy that you could never get out of your house. We had one of those, and I remember sitting on the floor and watching King Kong and being blown away by it. So just for nostalgic reasons, I have to own this in my collection, and that's probably why it's also my favorite King Kong film. I know that a lot of people like Peter Jackson's King Kong from 06 or 05, and I really didn't like that movie, honestly. I thought it looked pretty bad, and I think Peter Jackson has always done some of the best CGI, but I don't think it worked in that movie. And it also had a tie-in game that just brings back some really bad memories for me. So Peter Jackson's King Kong just didn't work for me. And, the Kong vs. Godzilla movies or Kong Skull Island that we've gotten over the recent years, I thought that those were all pretty damn atrocious. And speaking of Kong vs. Godzilla, we got the new one coming out this year, but I recently just saw Godzilla -1, and everybody who told me that was one of the best films of 2023, they were not lying. Godzilla -1 is fantastic. It is easily the best Godzilla film that I have ever seen. Now, I'm not the biggest Godzilla fan. I've told you guys that in the past, but I've never enjoyed any of the American Godzillas. 98's Godzilla I enjoy mainly, again, for nostalgic purposes. I was 6 years old when that came out. Thought the movie looked awesome. The tie-in toys were all fantastic. So I was into that at the time. But this movie, this is one of those special movies that would make a great double feature with Oppenheimer, mainly because of when the story takes place. And I just think that they capture the emotions that they can never capture that in those legacy released movies over the last 10 years here in the United States. And the biggest problem with those movies is the human characters. Nobody ever cares about the human characters. Godzilla -1, you do care about the human characters. That's the most important part of that film, are the human characters in that movie. Godzilla's there, but he is not the center of attention. He's there doing his thing. They're trying to beat him, but you really care about the emotional arcs of all the lead characters in this film, and I just think that that was one of the special films of 2023 that took me way too long to see. And it's funny, I just saw it last week in theaters, and now it's getting Godzilla -1 minus color, so the black and white version is going to be released in the United States January 26th in theaters, and we still haven't gotten a 4K Blu-ray announcement, but that is going to be a day one purchase for me, and that's where you guys will see my full review of the film. I don't want to spoil too much here on my thoughts, and mainly because we're here to talk about some physical media. And one thing about physical media that we also got announced this week is that Taxi Driver will be getting its own solo release on 4K Blu-ray. Taxi Driver's 4K Blu-ray has been out for a few years now, but it's been locked behind the Columbia Classics Volume 2 wall, like a lot of Columbia Classic films are. And that's really unfortunate. I love those box sets, but Columbia Classics Volume 3 didn't have any movies that really stuck out to me except for The Last Picture Show, and that did end up getting a Criterion 4K Blu-ray release earlier this year, which was also really good, but that was the only movie that stuck out to me in the Volume 3 classics, and I know a lot of people didn't love the collection in Volume 2, so they didn't pick it up, but unfortunately, if you want Taxi Driver on 4K Blu-ray right now, you have to get that collection to get it, and that's really unfortunate, but I'm glad to see that Sony is going to be releasing this on its own, giving everybody that 4K Blu-ray release, because I thought it was a great one. I thought it's a great transfer. It's one of Martin Scorsese's most famous films, one of the most important films of the 1970s. Robert De Niro's Travis Bickle is one of those iconic characters that has one of the most famous movie quotes of all time.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
And we deserve to have that on its own with a solo 4K Blu-ray release for the people who want to grab that one. Now, the image that's been floating around the internet is just the old Blu-ray steelbook that was already released, so that's not what the 4K Blu-ray release is going to look like. I mean, it might look like that, but it's not going to look identical to that one because that's got the Blu-ray logo on the side. But still, it's really awesome that we're going to be getting this on 4K Blu-ray for everybody who wasn't able to get it in the Columbia Classics Volume 2 collection. And then the other news we got this week was Criterion's April announcements, and, it's not the most flashy lineups. We get some good stuff in there, but nothing that's really gonna stand out in the crowd. So they announced Dogfight, I Am Cuba, Workmaster Harmonies, Picnic at Hangin' Rock, and La Haine. Now, the only movie that really stands out there to me is the Peter Weir film directed Picnic at Hanging Rock. That's really what put Peter Weir on the map. Peter Weir, I think, is one of the most underrated directors we've ever had. We've seen him bouncing around in plenty of different genres, whether it be in Fearless, The Truman Show, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, and then probably the movie he's most known for, in my opinion, is Dead Poets Society. So the guy's directed so many great films, and I'm really glad to add another one into my collection. Now, all those are pretty much 4K Blu-ray releases, except for Dogfight. Dogfight is only getting a Blu-ray release, but the other four are getting 4K Blu-ray releases. Are you guys interested in any of these Criterion Collection releases? I think April's probably one of the weaker months for them. We've gotten some great 4K so far this year. Like, I reviewed Lone Star earlier this week on 4K Blu-ray, and I never seen that film before. Not only is it a great film, but it's a great 4K Blu-ray. We're getting Trainspotting in about a week, so I'm really looking forward to that coming to 4K Blu-ray. So Criterion's had a good start to the year. I imagine these movies will all look great on 4K Blu-ray, and if you've never heard of them, sometimes it's nice to just blind buy a 4K, and you never know, you might absolutely love it. You know, so I've gotten burned on that in the past, so I don't recommend doing that, but sometimes that could be fun, and a couple of these movies do kind of stand out as far as the box art, so maybe I'll grab more than just the Peter Weir film, but Peter Weir's my guy, so I'm definitely going to be grabbing that one. And that was really it for the news this week. Really not too much more. There weren't really any other rumors floating around, although they are going to be releasing a Saw 10 film collection, which is, I think, exclusive to Walmart. It's a Lionsgate release. It's got all 10 films on Blu-ray, so no 4K. So if you already have a previous collection, you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll upgrade because they're getting 4K Blu-ray releases. No, that's one thing that's very frustrating about the Saw franchise is that we have Saw on 4K Blu-ray, we have Spiral on 4K Blu-ray, we have Jigsaw on 4K Blu-ray, we have Saw X on 4K Blu-ray, but everything in between that has only been released on Blu-ray. So it's like a mixed bag as far as the scans go. And I have the 8 film collection, and then they have the rest on 4K Blu-ray, so there's no reason for me to get it. The artwork is really nice, but if you don't have Saw yet on Blu-ray, this is a nice collection to grab. I imagine it won't cost too much, but eventually, especially since we're getting more Saw films, there will be an 11-film Saw collection. I think they already announced they're going to be making a 12th film, so then you'll have a 12-film Saw collection. But hopefully one day we'll get the complete collection on beautiful 4K Blu-ray, but that is not this release. And that was really all that was announced this week. So let's move on to the portion of the show with me and Faith where we answer all of your burning questions, and then we'll come back to me where I'll answer all your questions solo. So let's move on right now. Guys, look who I found. It's Faith. So Faith was out roaming the halls. I dragged her in here. And that's because she missed last week's show. I don't know where the hell she was, but she's back this week, and we have some questions to answer. But Faith also wanted to do a little bit of trivia with me, right?
Yeah, because John thinks he's a know-it-all in all the movies. So let's see.
Yeah, well, if you guys don't know, I actually don't do my videos with a script. Everything I do is off the top of my head. You know, I kind of have like an outline. I look over my notes before I start the videos, but everything else, I'm just shooting from the hip. So I'm like a cowboy, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
A handsome cowboy.
Handsome. First question. What are the dying words of Charles Foster Kane in Citizen Kane?
Rosebud.
How'd you know that?
Because Citizen Kane is one of the most famous movies ever, and I love it.
In The Matrix, does Neo take the blue pill or the red pill?
You know, I always have I'm always confused on this, but it's the red pill, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
But the only reason I remember that because I always I could hear the music cue of Lawrence Fishburne going, you could take the blue pill, and then you go back to and nothing is any different. You wake up none the wiser. Or you could take the red pill. I could always just hear that in my head.
What shocking Wes Craven horror movie carried the marketing tagline, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating"?
Last House on the Left.
You're so good. I can't believe this. This might be a hard one because I don't know if you've seen this. What real-life, on-again, off-again Hollywood power couple starred in a film's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Ooh, I've seen Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but I cannot remember. Is one of them Gene Kelly? No? I don't know.
Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
No, I wouldn't have got. I would have got Elizabeth Taylor originally, but I wouldn't have got Richard. I have to see that movie again, too. That's one of those movies I've only seen once.
All right. So the last one is, what American writer-director starred in several iconic European-produced spaghetti westerns?
Oh, it's Clint Eastwood, isn't it?
Yeah, good job, John.
So I just didn't get one.
You got one.
I just didn't get one.
Some of them were hard.
I mean, you know what it is? Why Rosebud's one of the most famous things. You've just never seen Citizen Kane.
Yeah,
so you would get that because, like, even on The Sopranos, they bring up the fact that he says Rosebud.
Yeah.
Like, that because they watch it.
But I wonder if people at home got it a lot of those things.
I think if they're cinephiles, they'll know Rosebud. Like,
No, I'm saying the other ones.
because the whole movie about that is trying to understand why he said Rosebud. Like, what is Rosebud? And you know what it turns out to be? Mm-hmm. His sleigh from when he was a kid.
Oh, okay.
Because mainly because it reminds him, because he left home, like his parents basically, they said, you know, you got some money, go live with this guy in the city, and we're gonna stay here and die. And he never saw his parents again.
That's sad.
It is very sad. And you know what? Even though he had all this money, he was rich and famous, and everything you would think would be all right. The guy had a pretty depressing and miserable life, and never really found happiness. And the only time he was really truly happy was before he left home with his mother. And he had that sleigh, Rosebud. Citizen Kane's a masterpiece.
All
you know
right.
what? Honestly, it's snowing outside. As weird as this might sound, Citizen Kane is one of my snow movies. Moving on to the Q&A portion of the show. That was fun. I enjoyed that. Maybe next week you could do that again, because I love trivia. But we actually have a question that's specifically for Faith, and this is from Rico Gomez. And he wrote, Kathleen Kennedy announced that a new Star Wars movie or a trilogy is coming out, but fans have become upset with the storyline going to be about women. How do you feel about this, Faith? Now, I assume he asked this because Faith happens to be a woman. And just to give a little bit of backstory on this, just a little bit, is they announced a couple Star Wars movies, and Disney has done this so many times, and it really pisses me off. They keep announcing movies, and then they never come to fruition. So they announced a couple. They announced one that Daisy Ridley is going to be starring in with a female director. I cannot remember.
It's Rey? Is that Rey?
Yeah, Daisy Ridley's Rey.
No, but the movie's called Rey, right?
Yeah, well, that's the rumor. And then they also announced that they're going to be making a Mandalorian movie with Mandalorian and Grogu, who is Baby Yoda, for people who might not know that. I don't want the Mandalorian movie because we already have 3 seasons of the show, and you're going to water down that product. I really enjoy the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I thought they were some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen.
Only way I would want to do The Mandalorian if that's going to be the final.
The finale?
Finale.
Oh, you know what? That's a great idea, honestly, if they did that. That would work fine. I would have no issue
I
with
would
that.
have no problem. You see it, you get 2 hours or 2.5 hours of
To say goodbye.
to say goodbye to the man. That would be the only way I want to see it. But to go back to the original question, I don't really have a problem with having women in these movies, or I will say it is pandering because, you know, we can have a mix of both. I think the original Star Wars really did lack a feminine touch a little bit. You know, you had Princess Leia, but
that was really it.
That was it. So, you know, we have to remember that there's just more to the world than just men. You know, and women have stories to tell as well. Not saying that, you know, it should be only women. Like, you know, the South Park, the Pandaverse.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny, and it was very well executed because you can oversaturate. And that's what I think a lot of people are upset about, is to oversaturate. It's overdoing it. It's pandering to just...
Overcorrecting.
Yes, it's because you missed the mark for years. You know, when you think about it, this has nothing to do with Star Wars, but what's her name that just won the Emmy for comedy that you love? Quinta Brunson.
Yes.
Quinta Brunson. She was after since the Jeffersons. There hasn't been someone a black woman who has won a award like that. And so that you have to think of all the funny women in between. You know, I love A Different World. You got the girl that plays Whitley. She was hilarious.
Yeah.
On Viv. Dark skin on Viv.
I was going to say dark.
You know, she was hilarious. There's a lot of women who deserved these awards and they never got it. And so you got to think about that and the idea of that there are spaces where women and women of color aren't really appreciated.
Yeah, for that work.
So I don't have a problem with it, but I do think that they do they're trying to overcorrect. It's a little too late.
Yes, and I agree with that. Like, I do, because I pretty much listening to Faith, I completely agree with her. I know that there's that sentiment, and people love to overuse this word. They like to use the word woke. And, there is a fine line. You really shouldn't have been just telling all these white man stories for so long. We should be telling stories about other groups of people and their way of living, whether it be women, men, men of different sexualities, men of different colors. We should be telling all their stories. Now, the thing is that you can't overcorrect and only tell those stories. You gotta try and find a fine balance where you're telling everybody's stories. And the thing is the reason why Disney announces like that is because they are trying to appeal to people.
That is the biggest company right now.
Yeah, they're trying to appeal to them, but actually not. It's like I was trying to actually tell Rico in private is, these corporations don't really care about these kinds of things. They care about money, and they just see the money from this. They think this is the biggest audience they can get.
I'm going to tell you exactly where Disney changed its mind. It was Black Panther.
Because it was so successful.
Black Panther was so successful, and they said, wow. We can get people to come out by telling different stories, black stories, women's stories. We can get people to come out, and they overcorrected.
Yeah. People seem to forget
Miss Marvel was great. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Miss Marvel was a good movie. It was okay, but no one went to go see it.
You mean the Marvels?
Yes, not Miss Marvel. I'm sorry, the Marvels, and no one went to go see it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's the problem. We can't get them out. Who made this joke? It was Bill Burr, and it's a really funny joke, and it kind of got me off topic a little bit, I have to say. He's like, you know what? Women love sports, right? We give them the WNBA. Even women don't go to WNBA games. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's some stories regarding women that need to be told.
But people seem to not realize that the reason why Black Panther was so successful is because the director is Ryan Coogler, who made Fruitvale Station, made the first Creed movie.
I don't believe that's the reason.
I think he's a genius when it comes to directing.
Oh, no, I do too. But I believe that, again, in the superhero space, you didn't have the Wakanda. You didn't have representation for little black kids.
No, you cried at the end of that because when they went back to Oakland, like that meant a lot to you.
Yeah, because that movie made the connection between Africans and African Americans.
Yeah.
It made that connection where no movie has ever. And then you had movies like, then after that, you had The Woman King that made that connection. But before that, we've never seen a movie like that.
No, we really don't see movies like that.
A lot of companies stay away, and they don't want it. A lot of people don't want to see these stories, so they stay away. They want to show you the stories you want to see.
That's what they're going to do. They're going to do what's ever best for their bottom line. Mm-hmm. If they believe that telling these cultural stories will get them money, that's what they care about. They don't genuinely. I'm sure there are people. I don't want to cast a big blanket over everyone. I'm sure there are people who do genuinely care about telling the stories of other people. I mean, if I was there, I'd want to tell as many different stories as I can, but my perspective is only from one point of view. That's the thing that people have to understand, is you can't just tell everybody's stories because you didn't experience that. Mm-hmm. People can only explain things that they have experienced. Yep. That's the thing. You can try and understand other people's experiences, and you should try and understand how other people have lived their lives, but you can really only tell the experiences of yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's the best way to do it. So you want to put people that's why I think Ryan Coogler was such a good director for that, because he knows how to tell those types of stories. He's from California. Fruitvale Station was an Oakland story. It makes sense.
I like Ryan Coogler.
Yeah, I just wish that he would make anything. He's only made the 2 Black Panther movies, and that's it. That's been his most recent thing, so you don't really get anything else from him. I would like to see him get out of the studio system. I feel like once these directors get stuck in the studio system like that, they don't leave. And it gets a little bit upsetting. I'd rather see them do those small indie films again. I just feel like they get more creative in that. Yeah. You take a great director and put him in there, and they don't really get to play.
There's certain directors like Spike Lee who, he's not afraid to tell a story. And I think more directors and more studios shouldn't be afraid to tell a story, but it should be an important story. Not to do it just to do it.
Not to
just
do it
like
to
what Disney is doing. I don't agree with that at all. I honestly don't want to see that. It's not my cup of tea.
No, I get that.
So that's my final answer.
It's like how in Endgame they forced in to have all the female characters on screen together. Mm-hmm. It just didn't make sense. Yes. But I mean, it was a good moment, but it just logically it didn't make sense. You could just see what they were going for with that. But that was a good question, Rico. I hope we answered it. Well, I hope Faith answered it. But I thought it was great. And now here's a fun question. I thought we'd have some fun with this. And it's from Kevin Kruger, and he asked, what are some actors that you had a crush on as a kid? I'm curious.
I got a list.
I know you have a list.
Okay, so... Okay, I was a big Boy Meets World girl, and I loved Sean Hunter. What's his name?
Isn't it Riley something, or Rory, or Ryder Strong?
Ryder Strong.
Yeah, that's her guy.
Loved him. And then, obviously, Will Smith. Will Smith was a big one for me.
You thought you had a shot, huh?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And, oh my gosh, ahead of time. It was so bad. Mario Lopez. I loved Mario Lopez.
Why?
Because do you see Mario Lopez in Saved by the Bell? He looked better than Zach Morris. I didn't understand the whole thing with Zach Morris. Why,
I don't get that either.
Why would all the girls love Zach Morris when Mario Lopez was
And they
right
dyed
there?
his hair blonde, so he looked like a white guy.
Yeah, even though he's like half Asian.
Yeah.
That was a big one. And then me and my sister, and he had such a small role, but me and my sister loved the elf from the Santa Claus that said, "Elves with attitude."
Yeah,
When
well,
we
that's
were a
weird.
kid.
Yeah, I was going to say that's weird now.
Yeah, when we were a kid, we loved him. But we're talking about kids.
Faith was 7 years old when Santa
Yeah,
Claus came out.
I
so
was
let's just be
7.
clear, Faith is not a child predator, so... But when she was a child, apparently, she liked the Santa Claus kid.
There was a time. Dwayne Wade from A Different World. There's a bunch. There's a
you
bunch.
had quite a list. The only
Yeah.
ones I can think off the top of my head that from movies, like I always had a really big crush on Cameron Diaz growing up, mainly because
Really?
The Mask, Charlie's Angels. There's a scene in Charlie's Angels where she's wearing, I think it's Spider-Man underwear, pops in my head all the time. That movie came out when I was 8 years old, and seeing
That does it for you?
that did it for me.
That was it?
That got me. I'm not gonna lie. That was a big one for me. Still think about that scene all these years later. So Cameron Diaz was a pretty big one for me. Who else off the top of my head? As a kid, who did I have a crush on as a kid?
That's funny.
I'm trying to think. Cameron Diaz was my number one. I'm just trying to think. She was Tina in The Mask. I saw that movie. You gotta think.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
think she's beautiful. She's a beautiful woman.
She still is pretty beautiful, I'm not going to lie to you. What else is out there? What else was out there for old John? I can't really think of anything that I had. I never was like a guy. Like I
You're
had
not
a crush.
Topanga or...
No, never was a Topanga person.
I hear so many guys
You know who I really
talk
liked
about?
I'm drawing a blank on her name because I always forget her name, but Denise from the Cosby Show. Zoe Kravitz's mom. Why am I drawing a blank? She's actually single now, so I got a shot again.
Well, yeah, I got a shot with Jason Momoa.
Yeah, he's single
apparently.
again too, but you know, what is her name? Why am I drawing a blank?
Lisa Bonet.
Lisa Bonet, yes. And you see it all in Angel Heart, so
She's beautiful.
She is.
Zoe Kravitz is beautiful too.
not as beautiful as her mom, Lisa Bonet,
Yeah,
when she had the
she's
long
pretty beautiful.
dreads. Oh my god.
I love in the
Oh my God.
This is like a
Oh, and I love
off-topic.
J-Lo and Selena. From Selena, because I was a big Selena
J-Lo
person.
is beautiful. She's beautiful in anything.
Yeah, but specifically in Selena.
I guess it's the red
and when she's-
lipstick.
No, it's when she's mowing the lawn and she's wearing the baseball hat and she's wearing like those track pants and you could just, forget it. I think
Oh my God.
I have moments.
Jesus Christ.
Well, that was a great question. Let's see if we have another one. What do you mean? You're over here fiending over freaking children.
No, I said Mario Lopez.
Oh, God.
I was 7. That's who I thought was good looking back then, you know?
Grow up. All right, here's our last question. It's from your favorite name on our channel, who is a producer, Mr. Smelly Potato.
I always laugh when you say it.
It's an awesome
What
name.
is your name, Smelly Potato? So we don't have to call
Mr. Smelly Potato.
We don't have to call you that.
No, I'm always calling him that. Hey, and look at this picture. It is a smelly potato. It's awesome. And he wrote, if Doc Brown loaded you in his time machine to travel back in time to watch one movie on the big screen, what movie would you see? So you can go and just watch this in the theaters at any time.
Clueless.
You'd go back to 1995 and watch Clueless on the big screen. You could have. You were 8. You had
Yeah,
a
but I
chance.
didn't.
Yeah, no. And we had another question similar to this. It would always be the Terminator for me. But I would like to go back to 1989, the summer of 1989. First, I'd like to hang out that summer. We had Ghostbusters 2, Lethal Weapon 2, The Last Crusade. But the big one that I want to travel back in time to see, Batman 1989, with everybody in the theater. Just, oh my God, can you imagine seeing that for the first time? Seeing Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton on the big screen. Batman, that would be my choice. Love that question. Love that movie. And we did see it on the big
Why
screen.
are your palms so big?
I have fat palms.
They're so big.
I have a hamburger helper. My hand looks like a hamburger helper glove. I don't know why.
I was just looking at it. I'm just
Yeah.
like, it's so big.
Big palm and like little sausage, like little baby, what's those? The
You
Johnsonville
don't have
sausage,
good
breakfast
palm
sausage.
to finger
No.
ratio?
It's a stupid hand. I hate this hand. Yeah, I got dumb hands. When you shake my...
Not worse than Matt.
No. Matt's hands look like mittens. That's why he had the nickname Mittens. You ever see those little hands from the old Burger King commercial where his hands are small? That's Matt. But anyway, that was a great question. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to kick it over to me for just solo questions. And then the first question that I'm going to be answering on my own is from Lorenzo Harris, man of God. And he asked, "Hey John, with my birthday this Friday, can you rank my 5 favorite movies of all time?" Thanks. And his top 5 favorite movies of all time are Apocalypto, Bloodsport, Predator, Do the Right Thing, and The Karate Kid in 1984, not to get confused with the remake, which is, it's alright. First of all, before I rank them, happy birthday, Lorenzo. Hope you enjoy your day, buddy. I mean, this came out after your birthday, so I hope you had a good birthday, buddy. Lorenzo's been a big supporter of this channel since pretty much for a very long time, maybe since like the beginning, or at least in the early days of the channel, and I really hope you had a happy birthday, buddy. So to rank these from worst to first, at number 5, I went back and forth which one I like more and which one I like less, but number 5, I'm going to have to go with Apocalypto. It's not my favorite Mel Gibson directed film, that's still always going to be Braveheart. I think Braveheart's a masterpiece. Apocalypto's kind of in that same vein, you know. One thing about Mel Gibson is he makes very gory movies. He never holds back, whether it's even in The Passion of the Christ. All his movies are pretty damn brutal. They're honest. They're raw. Now, I saw some complaints about this movie because it's not historically accurate, but as a film, as a whole, Apocalypto is a fantastic film. And then at number 4, we got the Jean-Claude Van Damme classic Bloodsport, which it's funny because I was going to rewatch this for this video, mainly because I wanted to rewatch it, and the 4K Blu-ray I have to pick up. I haven't picked it up yet. Frank Rodriguez, who has his own YouTube channel, Frank's Media and Reviews, he actually included Bloodsport in his top 10 4K Blu-rays of the year, and that's one I still have to pick up, so I'm going to rewatch it then. I haven't seen Bloodsport in quite some time, but, you know, Jean-Claude Van Damme, not the biggest fan of him, but I do think he's still better than Steven Seagal, who he always gets roped in with. I think that Jean-Claude Van Damme is still the better actor. He has the better movies, and Bloodsport is one of his best movies, so I'll have to put that at number 4. Then at number 3, I got The Karate Kid from 1984, Ralph Macchio classic. Now, I've actually met Ralph Macchio a few times. He lives on Long Island. I've cut the man's cold cuts. He's a really, really nice guy. He's kind of got this resurgence in his career now thanks to the show that's on Netflix, you know, Cobra Kai, that kind of rejuvenated his career. But Ralph Macchio's always been kind of a good actor, just really underappreciated. And The Karate Kid is a classic. So many people love this movie. There's so many classic lines from this movie that people still quote to this very day. It's a sports movie, so it's got all the sports movie tropes. It's a coming-of-age movie, so The Karate Kid really just does have it all. And then the top 2 for me, it was really hard for me to pick a favorite from these ones because Predator, I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger guy. He's one of my favorite actors ever. He's one of my favorite people ever, and Predator is one of his best films. This is John McTiernan 1 year before he did Die Hard, but this movie has but this movie's just as big of an action classic in my opinion, mainly because you get Arnold Schwarzenegger in there killing from Predator. You get Jesse the Body Ventura. Shane Black pops up in this movie as well. Bill Duke's also in this movie, and I just love Predator. The action in this movie, the one-liners, just a fantastic film. So I'm going to have to put that at number 2, and I'll give number 1 to Do the Right Thing. Do the Right Thing has actually grown on my list as becoming one of my favorite films ever. I just wish Spike Lee didn't make Malcolm X, because Malcolm X will always be Spike Lee's best film in my opinion. I think that's the greatest biographical film ever made, Malcolm X, so that will always be number 1. But Do the Right Thing has some of my favorite cinematography I've ever seen. It's a perfect summer film. It's got a great message, a message that, you know what, still rings true to this very day, that more people should watch Do the Right Thing from 1989. They should really watch that movie, and maybe they'll learn to understand and appreciate other people, and maybe we won't have these issues in the world that we do today. And Do the Right Thing was just hitting on that back in 1989. Spike Lee is one of the greatest directors to ever do it. He's a top 5 favorite director for me. Ernest Dickerson is one of my favorite cinematographers, and this movie is just a match made in heaven. They did so many great things with this. Great acting in this film, great message, great music. I absolutely love Do the Right Thing. So that would be my number 1 from your top 5 favorite films, Lorenzo. That was a great question, buddy. Thank you so much. And happy birthday. And then our next question is from Lord Raiden, and he asked, when are we going to get a sequel to Guardians? Now, I did a review of this movie Guardians from last year. The movie didn't come out last year, but I bought this Shout Factory Blu-ray last year to do a review for Lord Raiden, and Lord Raiden actually just sent me a gift. We're going to be reviewing it here on the channel, Casino Royale, the original Casino Royale. Look for that review tomorrow. The original James Bond film before the James Bond franchise took off. But he also recommended this film, Guardians. And Guardians is well, it's a one-of-a-kind film is the best way to put it. It is a good movie, Well, that's to be debated. It looks fantastic. There is so much money behind this movie. It was supposed to start a franchise. You know, it's basically a huge ripoff of the Avengers. There's even characters in here you can clearly see ripped off Avenger characters. It's ridiculous, but it's such an entertaining movie, and it's crazy the amount of money that was put into this film, and they wanted to start a franchise, and we were supposed to get a sequel. That was their original intention when they made this movie, was to make a sequel to Guardians. But of course, it flopped at the box office. The reviews were atrocious, but it's built a cult following that I'm proudly a part of. Is it a great movie? Like I said, that's really going to come down to what you're looking for. It's not a great movie plot and story-wise, but it sure is fun to watch, and I can definitely recommend you guys check this one out. But unfortunately, Lord Raiden, you and I both know that there is no chance we ever get a sequel to Guardians. This is a one-and-done franchise. Wish we would get it, and I don't even think there's any chance, buddy, that we ever get a 4K Blu-ray release of this one. It's one and done, and that's really unfortunate, but Guardians got a pretty good Shout Factory Blu-ray release. You wouldn't think it, but it really does. And then our first Kevin Kruger question of the week is, what are your favorite Blu-ray box sets of all time? Well, I whipped them out over here for you guys, and my favorite one that I've ever received, and it was actually a gift from my wife, is the Sony Pictures Classics 30th anniversary box set. Now, this came out last year. I was actually reviewing them all here on the channel, but nobody was really watching the reviews, so I think I only did like 6 or 7 of these individually reviewed here on the channel. But, you know, you get 10 classic films, basically from Sony Pictures Classics back catalog, and movies I had never seen before that I learned to love are in here, including Orlando. Orlando is a fantastic film. That's the first one in the box set, and I guess that's the one that put Sony Pictures Classics on the map, so that was a big one. You also get Schenectady, New York. That was really the standout film in here. That's the Charlie Kaufman directed film, Philip Seymour Hoffman starring film. I love that movie, so I was really glad to have that in here. SLC Punk. I mean, this is a great box set, and because they're Sony 4K Blu-rays, every single 4K Blu-ray in here is fantastic. Call Me By Your Name is in here. There is so many great movies in here. This is probably the standout. Good packaging. I actually do like this big box that it comes in. It doesn't feel cheap. It's a hard box. So this is my standout favorite 4K Blu-ray box set that I have ever received. Any Blu-ray box set. This is my favorite one. And then at number 2, these are all Blu-rays, but it's the complete Friday the 13th Scream Factory release. I love this one. You get every single Friday the 13th film that's ever been released, including Freddy vs. Jason and the 2009 remake. Most of these got new scans. They all have extras on them. You even get a bonus disc of extras. We were reviewing the entire franchise. We're going to do the second half next year, but I know we did up to Jason Lives, and I just love each and every single one of these films. Are these all the greatest movies ever made? No. Nobody's going to ever say the Friday the 13th franchise is going to be nominated for any awards or for anything to do with good acting, but this franchise as a whole is just so entertaining. I have to watch at least one Friday the 13th film every single Halloween season, and that's because they're just all entertaining movies. And thankfully, Scream Factory gave us this awesome box set, because before this, we had a box set release. It was released in this nice black tin, and that was years ago. It went out of print, and then we got this Paramount 8 film collection, so it only went up to Jason Takes Manhattan, so Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, and the 09 remake weren't included, but this one, you get them all. You get all 12 films. It still kills me that we haven't gotten a 13th film yet. It's called Friday the 13th. It writes itself, but because no one can stop being greedy and fighting over the rights to this franchise, they'd rather just nobody get any money. So instead of giving us a new film that we all have been asking for, we're just stuck with the 12 films. But you know what? The 12 films that we do have came in this beautiful box set that I absolutely love. It is probably Scream Factory's best box set release. It's my favorite from them, but I think this is definitely their best release they've ever done. Really catering to the collector out there and to the Friday the 13th fan. And then last but not least is Columbia Classics Volume 1. So we were talking about the Columbia Classics and Taxi Driver coming to 4K Blu-ray. The Columbia Classics Volume 2. Sorry, these are big and heavy. Kind of hard for me to hold up, so I'm going to put Volume 2 right down. I'm just going to show you guys Volume 1 because I think Volume 1 is the better one. I think this is really where Columbia, well, they're made by Sony. Sony owns Columbia Pictures now. They also own TriStar. 2 studios that I just grew up loving. You know, they're all owned by Sony now. Corporations own everything. But anyway, you come inside, you get 6 films in here. All of these are classic. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Lawrence of Arabia is one of the greatest films ever made. One day, if you guys ever want that, let me know. I'll do a full 4K Blu-ray review of that. Gandhi is one of my favorite biographical films ever made. That's one that won Best Picture, and I always hear people saying, you know, that's just an 80s Best Picture winner. It's not that great of a movie. No, it is a great movie. You also get Jerry Maguire in here. One of my favorite baseball films ever, A League of Their Own. So the first Columbia Classics box set was just phenomenal. I absolutely love it. 2 is a mixed bag. There are some movies in there that I never run back to, but you also get Taxi Driver and The Social Network in there, so you take what you can get. I still like that one. And then I thought Volume 3 was just a complete swing and a miss. And Volume 4 looks like it's going to be good, but that price has got to drop for me to grab it. So those are my favorite box sets, Kevin. Thank you so much for that great question. I really appreciate it, buddy. And the next question is from @Wahoo120, and he wrote, what is the most underrated director's cut or extended cut of a film? Well, my favorite director's cut of a film, and it's the final cut, is Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner has the best director's cut out there. You know, there's been numerous different cuts of Blade Runner, but the final cut is the best cut of that. Ridley Scott loves to do his director's cuts. There's even been rumors of a Napoleon director's cut coming to Apple TV Plus. Is it going to save that movie? I don't know. I actually really like Napoleon, probably more than other people did, but I would imagine that the extended cut will be much better. We've seen him do this in the past with movies like Kingdom of Heaven and, of course, Blade Runner. So I do think that Blade Runner has the best extended cut of any film, the final cut. That's the exclusive cut that you should watch. That's the one that takes out the narration. Now, he did take that out in the director's cut, but I do think that the final cut is the best version of Blade Runner. And then one that's underrated that no one really does talk about, and I think it's the best cut of the film, is the Terminator 2 extended cut. Now, that just adds in some deleted scenes, and actually when it came to 4K Blu-ray, the only thing that got a 4K upgrade was the theatrical cut, so they took out those deleted scenes, which really bothered me because the Extreme DVD was probably the version of Terminator 2 I watched most, and that always included the deleted scenes. So that kind of became the definitive edition of Terminator 2 for me, was to include those deleted scenes, including the scene that actually has Michael Bihn's Kyle Reese in there. I always appreciated that scene, and then they took that out of it. So it always feels weird to me when I watch the theatrical cut of T2, because I really had become accustomed to watching the extended and director's cut. And then, of course, we get to Justice League, the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Now, I think that 4-hour cut is just so much better than the Joss Whedon version of Justice League. Now, you could argue 4 hours might be too long. They changed the aspect ratio. I don't care. I still think it's a way better version than what we got. Justice League is another great director's cut. That was a great question, Wahoo. I really do appreciate that, buddy. Thank you so much. And the next question is from @SeanSodaPop. And he wrote, for my question, what movie would you like to see get a re-release in theaters, and what movie do you want to see a re-release this year? Well, I'm going to say it, but this isn't going to be my answer, because I say this answer for everything when it comes to these kind of re-release questions, is the Terminator. I always want to see the Terminator get a re-release in theaters. It's my favorite movie of all time. I've never seen it on the big screen, so it's always been kind of a sin to me. One of my other favorite movies that I've seen on the big screen was Batman '89, and that re-release actually really disappointed me. It was supposed to line up with its 30th anniversary. We just got the 4K Blu-ray, and the 4K Blu-ray was so much better than me seeing the re-release in theaters, because they put it in a crappy theater with like 16 seats and an old projector, and it just did not work, and I was really disappointed by that re-release. And another movie that I've always wanted to see on the big screen that hasn't gotten a re-release yet, and it's actually celebrating 50 years this year, and that is Chinatown, one of my favorite movies of all time. I would love to see a re-release of that on the big screen. Hopefully we get that this year. I think we actually might. I'm also hearing rumors we might get a 4K Blu-ray release from Paramount this year. I really hope so. I absolutely love Chinatown, one of my favorite films ever released. But some honorable mentions, I would also really love to see The Thing on the big screen. That movie is so atmospheric. You know, it's John Carpenter's classic, the best film he's ever made, even better than Halloween. I would love to see The Thing on the big screen. Poltergeist, that's another one I would love to see on the big screen. But for this year, it's definitely going to be Chinatown. But the other movies celebrating anniversaries this year that I would like to see on the big screen, Pulp Fiction, one of my favorite movies ever as well. It's been 20 years since Hellboy. People seem to forget that Hellboy was a big deal 20 years ago. You know, it kind of just got overshadowed once The Dark Knight came out and Iron Man and the MCU. But Hellboy was a big deal in 2004, and I really liked the original Hellboy. And Golden Army is pretty damn good as well, but that came out in 2008. So, you know, that just got completely forgotten about because of The Dark Knight and Iron Man. So it had no shot out there in the world. But the Hellboy celebrating 20 years, I would love to see that on the big screen as well. So thanks, Sean Soda Pop. I really appreciate that, buddy. And the next Kevin Kruger question, and this is a great question, and he asks, what is your favorite movie from the following directors? Oliver Stone. My favorite Oliver Stone movie is JFK, bar none. I do like Natural Born Killers. I like Born on the 4th of July. I like Platoon, but it'll always be JFK. That movie is pretty much a masterpiece, and I really rejuvenated my love for it because people were comparing it to Oppenheimer, and I watched JFK twice last year, and that movie's over 3 hours long because I watched it on Max after I saw Oppenheimer. I wanted to compare the two, and then it came to 4K Blu-ray courtesy of Shout Select. Watched it again and just absolutely loved it. So JFK is definitely my favorite of Oliver Stone's movies. And then you said David Fincher. David Fincher's Seven. His first, I'm not going to say it's his first movie. He did direct Alien 3, but this was the first time we really got to see David Fincher make a movie without studio interference. He was so soured on what happened on Alien 3, you know, after working with Fox and how they chopped up his movie. That, speaking of director's cut, that movie has a director's cut that, in my opinion, does not save the movie either. That movie, I think, is unsavable. I think Alien 3 is a huge drop-off from Alien and Aliens, and Alien 3 just, I really don't like that movie. It has its moments, but it really doesn't work. But once we get to 7 in 1995, David Fincher just hit a home run, a grand slam. That movie is an absolute masterpiece. He followed it up with The Game, Fight Club, Panic Room, Zodiac, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Mank, The Killer. The guy is still making movies, and I pretty much love every single David Fincher movie he's made since 7, but 7 is still his absolute masterpiece. And then Woody Allen. I don't really like Woody Allen movies, mainly because Woody Allen kind of bothers me, especially when you hear all those stories about him, and I didn't start really watching Woody Allen movies until after I had already known all that stuff, so it just left a bad taste in my mouth, knowing like kind of what he did, or at least what the rumors are that he did. It just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But I will say 1977's Best Picture winner, Annie Hall, is still a pretty good movie. Diane Keaton's great in that. Woody Allen himself does a good enough job in that movie. It looks beautiful. So, yeah, Annie Hall is definitely my favorite Woody Allen movie, but it shouldn't have won Best Picture over Star Wars in 1977. I get people love Annie Hall, but come on, we're talking about Star Wars. And next up is Stanley Kubrick. This was actually a little bit harder for me because I really want to say 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's probably my favorite. That's the one I revisit the most. But it's so hard. You know what? I'm going to go with, honestly, Paths of Glory. I think that one has really risen up my list as far as Stanley Kubrick goes. And I know that's probably not everyone's favorite in comparison to movies like The Shining, which I think is also a masterpiece. Full Metal Jacket, a masterpiece. Eyes Wide Shut, a masterpiece. A Clockwork Orange, a masterpiece. Doctor Strangelove, a masterpiece. But Paths of Glory, no one really ever talks about. It stars Kirk Douglas, and this movie, it just shows you the horrors of war and what people had to go through, and then just watching people get railroaded at the end of this movie. What happens at the end, I'm not going to spoil it for you. There is a 4K Blu-ray review here on the channel, but the end of Paths of Glory just made my jaw hit the floor. I mean, it breaks me every time I watch that movie. It's probably the most rewatchable of Stanley Kubrick's movie, even though it has a very dark ending. I just think that Kirk Douglas's performance in that movie just stands out. Actually, everybody's performance in that movie stands out. I know it's in black and white, and that not everyone can get behind black and white, but the 4K Blu-ray for that is fantastic. The only thing that makes that movie just not age that well is the actual war scenes. They don't really stand out, mainly because of the time. They didn't have the best effects, and those scenes kind of look, honestly, I'll be honest, they look pretty bad. But the rest of the movie, where it's just dialogue driven, I think all those moments work so well. So I think that, honestly, my favorite movie from Stanley Kubrick is going to be Paths of Glory, even though I'm probably but if I'm being honest, I know that's not his best movie. So it would probably, if I was giving you guys the top 3 Stanley Kubrick movies at this very moment, and this can change, I would go Paths of Glory, The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then right behind that gets a little bit tougher, but Paths of Glory right now is my number 1. And next up is Steven Spielberg, and this is pretty easy for me. It's always been my favorite from him, and that is E.T., 1982's E.T., the same year, even though he doesn't get credit for it, supposedly he at least co-directed Poltergeist. The guy hired all the actors. There's pictures of him floating around with the cast of E.T. and Poltergeist at the exact same time. If Steven Spielberg directed Poltergeist for real, that would be my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. Mainly because I think Poltergeist is one of the best movies ever made, but E.T. is my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. I grew up with that movie. I have a lot of nostalgic feelings about that movie. I think it's a masterpiece. Even though Close Encounters of the Third Kind is right on its tail, and then right behind that is Last Crusade. I mean, Steven Spielberg has directed so many movies I absolutely love, so for E.T. to really stand above the rest of them really should show you the quality of E.T. Plus, that John Williams score is fantastic. It is my favorite score from John Williams. There's scenes out there where you can watch the movie without the John Williams score and just see how much the John Williams score improves those scenes, though you don't work without that score. That's how good John Williams is at making scores for films, and he mastered that with E.T. Right behind that would be Jurassic Park, though. I do love Jurassic Park as well. That's another one that I grew up with, Jurassic Park, so of course that's one of my favorite movies from him. But, that would probably be closer to the bottom of my top 5 now. I think Close Encounters and Last Crusade are actually better than Jurassic Park, but none of them are going to be able to touch E.T. for me. And the next one is Brian De Palma. A lot of people might pick Usual Suspects in this case, or Scarface, but for me it's Blowout, starring John Travolta, John Lithgow, and Nancy Allen. I think this movie is a masterpiece in filmmaking. It has a great, noir type of story where we start to uncover and peel back the layers, and I just love this movie. I love the way, like I said, the way it's shot is really what stands out to me. Great audio design as well. It's got a great Criterion 4K Blu-ray, and if you have the previous Blu-ray, it's actually a pretty big upgrade to the 4K Blu-ray, so I can recommend you do that. But yeah, that's my favorite Brian De Palma film. And next up is Ridley Scott. And this, I mean, you really are putting me in a box here. I don't know what to pick. Is it Alien or is it Blade Runner? I go back and forth on this. I love both of these movies. He made these movies back to back, and I think what stands out about both of these movies is the production design. You really feel like you've lived in these worlds, whether it be an Alien, like that's a lived-in ship. The city of LA in Blade Runner, that's a real city. He creates worlds, Ridley Scott, and he didn't know better than he does with those two movies. He still does great world creating with movies like Napoleon and House of Gucci. Like, he knows how to create these worlds, but he never nailed it more than he did with Alien and Blade Runner. So what would I pick? I guess I'm going to go with my gut on this one, and I'm going to have to say it's Blade Runner. As much as I love Alien, and I love Alien, Blade Runner is one of the most special movies ever made. That's one of those movies that really grew on me. I didn't love it the first time I saw it, mainly because I was expecting a sci-fi action film. That's not what that movie is. That is a sci-fi, really just a straight sci-fi film. That's what it is. It's a science fiction movie. Harrison Ford kills it in that movie, and it really just leaves you thinking, and that's the best thing about a good sci-fi movie is like what it takes to be a human, and they captured that. But again, it's the production design that stands out to me, the amazing score. I probably listen to the score of Blade Runner probably once a month at least, still to this very day. It's not my favorite score ever. I still think it's Batman 89, but Blade Runner's not that far off. It's a very atmospheric score that helps to really build up what this movie is, and then the visuals just stand out. It's got a great 4K Blu-ray you should check out, and its sequel, Blade Runner 2489, it's a really good follow-up. Is it as good as the original? No, but the Hans Zimmer score is great. It looks amazing, and Denis Villeneuve also knows how to make some great-looking movies. I really think that he's like our second coming of Ridley Scott. He just doesn't make as many movies as Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott likes to put out 2 movies a year sometimes, so he doesn't do it that much. But I guess Denis Villeneuve kind of falls in the middle of Christopher Nolan and Ridley Scott, in my opinion. And next up is Rob Zombie. I'm not the biggest Rob Zombie guy, not gonna lie to you guys. Don't like the Halloween movies. Firefly trilogy, I'm not a huge fan of those. Really didn't like the remake of the Monsters that he did. But there is one movie that does stand out, and that's 31. This is a fantastic horror movie. It's actually well edited, well shot. I really think this is a Rob Zombie at the top of his game. It's still got all the Rob Zombie stuff in there. You know, it still feels like that backwood, dark and dirty and gritty tone that's inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Last House on the Left. That's still all in there, but he found a way to finally tell a compelling story with a good plot, and I think 31 is the best of his films. And then last but not least is John Carpenter. You guys aren't going to be surprised by this one, but it is The Thing. Even over Halloween, I still think The Thing is a masterpiece. Unlike most John Carpenter movies, when that came out, it was a critical and commercial failure. I don't know what critics were thinking back in the 70s and 80s when it comes to John Carpenter movies, but almost all of his movies did bad critically. I don't know why. It wasn't until, and I don't like that they do this. This is one thing about critics that always kind of bothers me, and I know I'm a critic myself, but still, one thing is like they kind of go back and they get like this pushback from fans who are like, how did you give this movie like 1 or 2 stars? And they go and do a retro review and they retroactively review the film and just kind of look back at it and go, oh, you know, I was wrong here. Now listen, I've gone back and re-reviewed films and I've gone, oh, I was wrong about this, but it almost kind of feels like it's not genuine. It feels more like they were going back and trying to cater to the fans because they knew they were wrong. Sometimes I feel like a critic goes into a movie, they watch it and they don't really like it, but then they realize, oh, you know what? I was wrong about that movie. I better go back in and re-review it so I don't get shit on by other people. And I feel like that happened a lot with John Carpenter movies because I just don't know what critics were seeing. How did you not think that The Thing is a masterpiece back in 1982? I just don't get it. And again, that came out in June of 1982, the same month as Poltergeist, E.T., Wrath of Khan. I mean, I'm Blade Runner. What a month. June of 82. If you were around then, how many movies did you see that month? Because I would have just been all over the place. I wouldn't have left the theater, to be honest with you guys. So that was a great question, Kevin. Thank you so much, buddy. I really do appreciate that. Well, that's going to do it here for another episode of Let's Talk Physical Media. My name is John.
And I'm Faith.
And we'll be back next week, so if you guys want to ask some questions in the comment section below, feel free to do that. We also have channel memberships where you can find our producers, Mr. Smelly Potato, Nocturnal, John Doe Juggalo, and Jason Martin.
What was that?
I like to say his name all fancy like that. And you can also find our director, Frank's Media and Reviews. He has his own YouTube channel now. Make sure you go check him out over there.
Who is this?
Frank, remember Frank Rodriguez?
Oh, yeah.
His name now is Frank's Media and Reviews. He's got his own YouTube channel now.
Congratulations, Frank.
Yeah, Frank.
You guys should do a collab.
Well, we'll do one in the future. And actually, the Original Fuzz reached out to me. We'll probably do a collab in the future as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we definitely, there's plenty of stuff we got lined up for the future of this channel. But if you want to stay in touch with us, you also got to like this video, subscribe, share, turn notifications on. Then just get out in those streets And tell your friends about us.
Relax.
Well, I have a cup of coffee in me.
You relax, dude.
We'll be seeing you guys around.